Hello and good morning. This is Deep Dives with New Perspectives. I'm Michael Bartlett with,
Merrylinn LeBlanc.
if you like us, click like, hit subscribe, tell your friends about us, share, ask us questions. We're here to share our astrological wisdom and ideas about kind of what's going on the planet and, kind of what's going on in our minds. Anything on your mind right now, Merrylinn?
Yeah, what's been on my mind has a lot to do with the sign of Pisces and Neptune and Pisces. Over the past month, the last 3 weeks especially, we had, the Sun and Mercury meeting up with Neptune. And of course, Neptune, spends 14 years in a sign. And so she's got a few more years to spend. She's in the last third of that sign, but there's still a few more years to go. And there's just a lot of issues, but the major that are coming up with that. And they're reminding me that on the downside of the sign of Pisces, as well as Neptune, is that there is a lot of confusion and nonsense that goes on around this, because this is both a planet and a sign that don't have boundaries. It's like encompassing everything. And you open a container for it and it just kind of swishes it like a tidal wave. It just kind of splashes in there. And of course,
Bob.
in the southeast, we saw these storms over the past week that have been most unusual in terms of partly location and severity. The winds and the water and the damage. I mean, which seems to be accelerating. And some of that is Neptunian and some of it's Uranian energy, etc. But the most recent thing is that yesterday, Monday, the George Floyd trial began. And it drew me kind of to look at that. Now, trials in and of themselves are more a Jupiterian thing. But as far as the sign of Pisces goes, Jupiter is one of its co-rulers. It was before we discovered Neptune, it was the ruler of Pisces. In classical astrology, they still look at it as in that way, and some of us astrologers do. And I would say there's a case here for it. Jupiter isn't in Pisces yet. It's in Aquarius, but I believe, and I wrote a bunch of notes. If I can read my own writing, it'll be a miracle. But Jupiter will go into Jupiter will go into Pisces in 2022. I don't have the exact date that I can see, right? It's not popping right out at me. But in 2022, which is next year, at some point, Jupiter will be in Pisces while Neptune is still in Pisces. Jupiter at the beginning and Neptune at the, but Jupiter just spends roughly a period of a year. I mean, sometimes like this, actually this summer, Jupiter is going to move into Pisces, go retrograde and move back into Aquarius to spend the equivalent of 12 months or so in the sign of Aquarius. So there's that kind of interaction. But, back in January, Jupiter and Neptune entered their balsamic phase, which is, in an 8-phase system like I do in the moon cycles. It's a phase that in the natural zodiac starts in the last half of Aquarius, where Jupiter is right now. But, Jupiter, because of both its retrograde cycle and Neptune's, has kind of gone back into the last quarter, but it kind of does this flushing back and forth. But it's actually begun the energetic of a balsamic phase, which is vision. It's a very Neptunian time, a visionary phase, taking everything that you've learned. This is the Aquarius, the last half of Aquarius part of it, taking everything that you've learned about the systems that we live by and kind of putting that into the dream world space, or the envisioning space. What's the future going to bring? What would we like the future to bring? And the George Floyd case is an example where I would say I can't answer percentage wise, but I know a lot of us, people in my circle, who watched that video of his killing, and I'll call it a killing, that's what they're on trial for right now, said there is no question in our minds that this was out and out murder. No question whatsoever. However, in listening to the news information programs that I listen to or watch, there was yesterday on Tom Hartman's show, the guy identified him as Black himself, who was talking, but really thinks that that Chauvin, Derek Chauvin, the police officer who had his knee on the neck of George Floyd, will be acquitted. And it just churned my insides. I thought, what has our justice system come to? So that made me kind of look at Jupiter and then look at Neptune, because there's this energy's with us this year since last year. And actually, I don't have their birth dates, but I even looked at the charts of these two men. George Floyd was a Libra sun, which you kind of think about balance and fairness with Libra. And Derek is a Pisces sun. And in the very last degree of Pisces, by the way, for his son. Well, and so we could say
and that's the world point, right? When you think about it, I mean, that 29 degrees Pisces is right next to 0 degrees Aries, which is the world point. And what's happening here right now, he is being literally, the spotlight is on him. And the challenging part for this is, regardless of, and I don't even want to even say anything on that, that in a way, what this is also doing is bringing the awareness to this overall issue, which is that people of color have experienced a disproportionate threat every single time they are involved with a police officer.
Right. Well, the sign of Pisces, one of the mundane subjects that comes under there is bondage, slavery, and oppression.
Right.
It's part of that territory. Because we are all linked in some way. It kind of goes to spiritual myths, like about the fall and about Michael and the archangel Michael and Lucifer and their battles, where it's sort of like this notion, and these are myths, just as the Greek myths that we refer to are myths.
Which are metaphors, which are archetypes.
Right. They say something. I think they say a lot more about our earthly existence than they do about other existences outside of this earthly framework that we humans are operating in.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of that, and also too, when you think about this change from Aquarius to Pisces, I mean, while there is a bondage aspect and a slavery aspect, it's also the release from that, as well as the collective understanding and kind of dream under which we've all been living that hasn't really been seeing the truth. Those are the other things I see as elements that are coming. I mean, so there's, and that's the other thing that's very, and I get kind of goosebumps with it, because Neptune, being those outer planets really take an amazing amount of, information in a way, or parts of our lives, and are interwoven in such amazingly intricate ways. And so, it's this and that, it's this and it's not, Pisces and Neptune aren't, there's nothing about them that is about separation or exclusion.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And so there's this, so in some ways, these two men our archetype, their life, this instant in their lives is an archetypal moment that we need to address in terms of our social human interaction. And I mentioned with Floyd how he's this Libra sun, the sense of justice, this sense of balance and harmony and so forth. And um, and the whole notion of Black Lives Matter and how this instance not only affected the Black community, but others who want social justice for everybody, who don't, who know the history here and know that there has been a I don't know, boatload, one of the, like that tanker in the Suez Canal, master super tanker or whatever that was stuck. There's a boatload of injustice behind this that needs to be corrected, that needs to get unstuck.
Needs to be brought into our awareness, right? That's kind of what stuck does. And that's what Jupiter in a way is, I think, is Jupiter is like that part that expands it until you have to pay attention. Here's Jupiter and Neptune in a way working already in a way, this big, I want to say turd in the Suez Canal, but it's kind of stuck and it backs up the whole system. And then you begin to see, here's another Pisces thing. It's not just about those ships and those there. It also hits the manufacturing companies in all the countries around the world. It hits the individuals who are working there. It hits the ways in which we're all connected.
Exactly. And moving to Derek Chauvin's chart and that last degree of Pisces, which is it's sort of like an ideal has become concretized. It's the image that comes out of the Sabians. I'm paraphrasing it. And what Chauvin to me represents from an astrology perspective is the ideal of slave owners and people who have grown up in that culture and somehow are still connected to that culture, how those people are still connected to this ideal that certain people are inferior and that certain people it's okay if they do not get the justice that everybody else got or the treatment that other people seem to get in a similar situation. I mean, for God's sake, and I think it was his brother, I'm talking now about George Floyd's brother, when this incident happened shortly after, he said, my brother was killed over the question of a $20 counterfeit bill, which was has never yet to this day been investigated, and which in most cases they would have just sent a notice to him and investigate the case. They would not have stopped and pulled him out and done what we saw with 4 police officers surround. I mean, the whole thing is, and this goes to Pisces, the whole thing is absurd. It's like nonsense. It's like where did this come from? And Derek's son on that degree is sort of like he embodies this ideal that grew out of the birth of this nation and the slave owners in the South and others, have bought into it over the years, etc. And what struck me today as I was just writing these little notes about this is his last name, spelled Chauvin, Chauvin. Shall I continue the word? Chauvinistic, a white male man representing the worst behavior, in my opinion, of white men in our culture that still exists. Or, I mean, if you were to listen to women talk about, and actually in this past week, I had a conversation with a woman where, for God's sake, and I'm quoting her now, for God's sake, this country was found by white chauvinistic men. I mean, I can't make this stuff up.
No, but you also think, and then, we go back to that. I think what, the other aspect with this Pisces theme is the Pisces of martyrdom for greater awareness, right? So this is another thing, in a sense, George Floyd has become a martyr towards a greater understanding of vision. That what Breonna Taylor endured for something, again, that should have just been a simple notice. I mean, what is this great fear that white people have against Black people? It was interesting when I was on Stormy Grace's show. We were talking. Somehow we got on the topic of whose voice they use
Who's
for
Stormy
God.
Grace? Who's
Stormy
Stormy
Grace
Grace?
is an astrologer on YouTube, and is doing the Stormy Academy free astrology academy.
Okay.
She says, when you think about it, the movies we see, who plays the voice of God? Morgan Freeman or another Black actor. And I was like, and I said, well, if people's vision of God as a Black man, there's going to be quite a reckoning at some point. But
Well, I think they have that wrong. I think it's a Black woman.
I'm sure, actually, it is. I mean, that's who we were all born of anyway, when you think about it. I mean, so, why wouldn't it be, in a sense? But I think, again, this is this other thing of, where what I think the hard part that I've never really understood is how is a person's skin color, religion, sex, or anything somehow make them less or unhuman? What is it that, because Chauvin also is a representative, kind of almost an apex. I mean, here he is at 29 degrees, and you think Pisces is this mutable, flowing, loving, accepting everyone kind of thing. But, here it is getting ready to almost, in a sense, warriorize itself, right? Getting ready to move into Aries and take these ideas that have come from that last cycle and conquer. And that's kind of what he did. Here I am, I will plant my knee, and this, I am showing my power, and then not only, and then I don't know if you've seen those videos, there are people around saying, hey, you know what, he can't breathe. And, they all start videoing. I mean, it's like, even that reflection of people catching him in the act wasn't enough to wake him up in the moment that, hey, you know what, maybe I'm not handling this right. There may be consequences to my actions.
Maybe this is, to be Jupiterian, this is too excessive. I'm going overboard in
but
this.
no regulation in that sense. It's like, I think, and we see this over and over and over again. I mean, this use of excessive force. I mean, teenage boys who are shot in their back, who supposedly brandished a weapon against the officer. Well, if they're shot in the back, they can't really brandish a weapon towards you, can they? And then the excessive use of force against individuals who have mental health, or it just goes on and on and on. And so, it's how do we bring greater consciousness and awareness and stop this us versus them sort of a mentality, and allow for the fact that we're all in the same community.
Right. One of the things that Pisces says to us is we're all spirit. There really is no separation between us. And that's part of the message of all of this, that, we start to recognize that there is a humanness that we all have in common. And that what's peculiar to me in this thinking about this is, with Neptune kind of, connects with that, especially related to the ocean, where all life's begun on this planet, so we've been told, as well as symbolized in astrology and other occult practices, that all life is there, and all life can go back to it and merge and be morphed and change. And this is telling us to bring that sense of connectedness, of oneness, of non-separation back to our interactions. But I have to point out something. I mean, Jupiter is about, when it's related to Sag, it's about the laws. And somehow or other, and Jupiter, was in its sign a couple years ago, and it will be in its other sign next year, as I said. And maybe, well, Jupiter's in Pisces, maybe there's some more law changes. I mean, look at our lawmakers who are more like Saturnian, who have lost a sense, in my mind, of the spirit of the law. I mean, it was fine for Jupiter to break the law, but then, when it came to having to put somebody in line, he had to say, oh yeah, this is our law, so we have to follow this. But, there should be the recognition that we can change this too. We don't have to keep behaving this way. But I want to make another factor in terms of the laws, is that brings in Saturn, the government, the lawmakers, who are the lawmakers, et cetera. And isn't it interesting that in the perpetrator, I will call him, in this case, had his knee on this other guy's neck. Now, the knee is represented by Capricorn or Saturn, and the neck is represented by Taurus. Some people go Gemini because of the vocal cords there, but it is, but because of the eating and taking in whether it's information, it's Taurian, which is related to Venus, who in her Libra expression is about justice. So again, these two figures that we can watch every day this week on the news and into April. Well, April starts this week, but next week as well. They say it probably is going to go on for a few weeks, and I would say that these two figures are hugely archetypal in this instance, in this incident, and that's just why, I know we've talked about Pisces and Neptune over the last month with some of the planetary connections that have been made there. But it just struck me how, there's confusion here and there's compassion here. These are Pisces things. And there's some nonsense when it comes to the legalese stuff.
And we're trying to chart new territory, right? I mean, in a way, because what's nice about right now and like during the time of this trial is Jupiter will be in Aquarius. So what many people might not realize, and I really hope that the gentleman who was interviewed and said that that Chauvin will be acquitted, I hope he's wrong, because I think the reaction from the collective will be I don't even want to say, because I mean this to be honest, the reason why this is all being brought into our awareness is because it needs to be dealt with in the appropriate way. And if the courts don't start finding all in our communities equal, then we're not going to have a community. We're not going to have a United States. I mean, hello, the Pluto returned to the US chart, right? I mean, this is all fitting in. If we can't all get along, I mean, if we're going to be a melting pot, damn it, we have to act like a melting pot. A melting pot is strengthened by all the wonderful spectrum of experience, not just a damn whitewashed minority. And we're going to have to learn, or we're going to lose it.
You're not the only one to have voiced such a conclusion. Well, Michael, I've said what I wanted to say on this. I don't know if there's more that you want to bring up on it.
No, I just hope, for those of us out there with any levels of consciousness, just put some light towards the right thing happening and voice, whenever, what those of us who can pass as being white and pass as getting away with these quote luxuries that have been happening, the only right thing that can happen now is making sure that all of our brothers feel as safe as we do.
You know what? My computer's going to restart. It says
Okay.
here, message in 45 seconds.
All right.
So
Tell them how people can find you.
connect with us on YouTube. Subscribe. What's your phone number?
You tell, because you're going to lose your spot first. Go ahead.
Oh, 690-1878. Moonwiseastrology.com. Thank you.
And you find me at coremichael.com, 505-690-3860. Thank you so much. Talk to you all soon. Bye.